After my father-in-law's funeral, my unemployed wife came into a $450 million inheritance. Out of nowhere, she told me she wanted a divorce, saying, "I don't need you anymore." I just laughed and said, "Don't come to regret this later." Once the divorce was finalized, my ex-wife was caught off guard when my father-in-law's attorney started laughing. Confused, she asked, "Are you serious?" The lawyer responded, "Did you even read the will properly?" My ex-wife's face went completely pale. I looked at my dad's bank account and saw nearly $600 million in it. I thought to myself, this money is all mine now. I don't need you anymore. After my kind father-in-law passed away, I was still grieving when my wife came to me and casually dropped the news that she wanted a divorce. It turns out she was only showing her true colors after getting her hands on the $600 million inheritance from her father. She saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone to a life without having to work. I had seen glimpses of her true nature before, but I never realized she was this awful. Before I knew it, I was clenching my fists, angry at myself for being fooled into this marriage. I could accept being deceived, but I couldn't stand her speaking badly about my kind father-in-law. "Fine," I said. "Hand me those divorce papers." I snatched the papers from my wife, signed them quickly, and threw them back at her. "All right. The rest is up to you," I told her. "Yeah. Leave it to me," she replied smugly. She offered to send my belongings, and I walked past her out of the living room and left the house. I knew my wife would regret divorcing me. Sure enough, she called me later, panicking when I explained that the $600 million was just a fantasy. "My name is John. I'm 45 years old, and I work in sales. My wife, Mary, is also 45 and used to work in sales, but now stays at home. There's a story behind her becoming a homemaker, but to explain that, I should start with my first wife. This is my second marriage. My first wife died in a work accident 5 years ago, leaving me a widower. Between life insurance and severance pay, I received about $600,000. Since my first marriage happened later in my 30s, we didn't have any children. I inherited the money along with my ex-in-laws, but they told me, "We're almost 82 years old and don't have much time left, so we don't need it." I couldn't accept that and decided to give the money to my ex-brother-in-law and his wife, who were living with my ex-in-laws. However, they also said, "We don't need much since it was my brother's money. You should use it." So they only took a small portion of the money. In the end, after paying a significant amount in inheritance taxes, most of the money ended up with me. Combined with our savings and the fact that I had a job, I became fairly well off by the age of 41. But even with all that, sitting alone at home and looking at the numbers in my bank account, I felt empty. When I came home from work, no one was there, and no one ever would be. The bed beside me stayed perfectly made, just as it was before I went to sleep. The worst part was when I accidentally made breakfast for two. As I took a bite of the second piece of toast, I thought, this must be what it feels like to have a hole in your heart. I really wanted to take some time off, but I had to keep working. So, I went back to my job with this emptiness inside me, constantly feeling a sense of void. I desperately wanted someone, anyone, to listen to me, and that someone turned out to be my current wife. When I told her about my wife passing away and how I had to take some time off because of it, she said, "I'm sorry for any inconvenience." I quickly replied, No. It was no inconvenience at all. Besides, your husband was a lucky man to have someone who cared for him so much. I'm sure he was very happy. She then shared a bit about herself, saying, "As for me, I'm terrible at relationships. Even when I do date someone, I get dumped quickly. I know it's because of my careless personality, but it seems hard to change who you are." My wife and I were business acquaintances before we got to know each other better. I knew she was a cheerful person, so when I visited her company, I ended up telling her everything. Normally, anyone would find such a dark and heavy story off-putting, but she listened quietly and then cheered me up with some lighthearted jokes. Her words and smiles seemed to fill a bit of the hole in my heart. She continued to listen to my stories, and we started meeting outside of work. One day, while we were talking, I accidentally dropped a receipt, and she jokingly said, "Wow, my wallet is twice as thick with coins. You dropped a receipt." We both laughed. "I need to organize it, but it's such a hassle," I said. When I tried to pay at a store, receipts started falling out as I pulled out some cash. She picked up the receipts and handed them back to me, and I stuffed them back into my wallet, complaining about the coins. It seemed like the receipts were also making my wallet bulky. "You're like a kid, John," she teased. "What? I'm 45, you know," I replied. Just as I said, I was a bit careless, but watching her, I felt the hole in my heart slowly start to close. We kept meeting privately, and a year later, I told her I had feelings for her. It had only been a year since my previous wife passed away, so I was torn, but I felt like my late wife was telling me, "Don't stay stuck, move forward." So I decided to start dating Mary. People around us had their opinions, but making that important decision helped me begin to heal. However, just a month later, Mary gave me an even bigger concern and asked me to make an incredibly important decision. Shouldn't we get married? Given our age, it's better to decide sooner rather than later. This time, I couldn't hear my late wife's voice guiding me. It felt like she was telling me to trust my own intuition and keep moving forward. So, I decided to marry Mary. "Okay, let's get married," I said, surprising even myself with how quickly I made that decision. It was likely Mary's personality rubbing off on me. I started to think that a bit of carelessness wasn't so bad if it made me more positive. At the same time, I learned from Mary that too much carelessness could be problematic. Wait, live with your dad? I asked. Yeah. Just recently, he got sick and needs help with daily living. He kept working past 73, thinking he was still young, and now this happened. What about your mom? Is she helping him? Didn't I mention it? My mom's not around. My parents divorced when I was young, and I haven't seen her since. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Sorry. Don't be mad, but it's a heavy topic to bring up when we weren't sure about getting married yet. Right? I figured I'd tell you later. Even if you put off talking about living together, you could have told me about your parents. I would have known that living together might be an option. Well, let's not sweat the small stuff. Just meet my dad and then decide if you're okay with living together. And if I say I can't live with him? We'll figure it out then, I said with a smile, but Mary couldn't smile back. I wasn't planning to say I didn't want to marry her just because I didn't want to live together. I just wished she had told me the important things earlier. I thought being careless wasn't so bad, but now I see it's not a good thing after all. In the end, I agreed to meet her father as Mary suggested. Then I began to understand what she meant by small stuff. Your house is pretty big, I said. Just a bit. It's just me and Dad, so we have some extra rooms. If you move in, you can use any of the spare rooms, I replied. I was about to meet her dad for the first time, so I was a little nervous. Ignoring my feelings, Mary opened the gate and walked towards the front door. Her house was 3 stories high, slightly bigger than the neighboring houses. Living there with just the two of them seemed quite luxurious. That's what I thought, but Mary seemed dissatisfied. Dad's so stingy. He should have built a bigger house, she muttered to herself. But I was too nervous about meeting her dad to confirm what she said. Dad, I brought her. This is Mary, I said. Nice to meet you, Mary said. Sorry to greet you from bed. It's been hard to move lately, my dad replied. Please don't strain yourself.